The New Babylon, Chapter 21. When Bryce and Bear arrived at the edge of town, they positioned themselves on a ridge overlooking the road where the diner was located. Bryce flipped down the PVS-13 night optic he had affixed to his headband. He slowly and methodically scanned the area around the diner. Seeing no signs of life, he widened his circle of search to include the hillside above. That's where he saw it. A single heat signature. He watched Lindsay move her head around and squirm slightly as she nervously waited. "Lindsay," he said quietly. He pointed to her location for Bear, and she looked through the optic on her rifle. "Got her," she said, as she too saw Lindsay. Bryce recognized Will's protocol for surveillance placement on a single location. He knew that Will would have the second OP set up somewhere opposite the first one. Something wasn't right, he thought. Why would Will have Lindsay manning an OP alone? She would be with Will or Will Jr. After a few minutes, he spotted the second position. "There," he said to Bear as he pointed it out. He could just make out the heat signature for a single head popping up, looking out over a large rock. He flipped his optic up and lay prone in the tall grass. "What's the matter, big man?" Bear asked. "I've seen that look before, and I know it ain't good," she said. Bryce didn't want to share his reservations with her. Also, he knew that one of them had to go make contact. While he was the clear choice for Overwatch, he wasn't about to let his wife walk into a trap, if in fact it was a trap. He rubbed his eyes and looked up at Bear. "Hun, why would Will put Lindsay out on that OP by herself? And I only make out one person on the other side. It doesn't add up." Bear considered what her husband was saying. "Looks like they're behind a large rock over there above the diner. That's probably Will's head we see, and Junior's out of sight behind the rock." "Well, maybe, but still seems off. Why would Will stay with Junior and put Lindsay out alone? It doesn't make sense." "So what are you thinking?" she asked her husband. Bryce rubbed his eyes again and paused, finally saying, "A couple possible scenarios. There's only two here, and the third is being held to force them to draw us out. But if you're gonna hold someone for leverage, it would be one of the kids. If you want to get a man to cooperate, holding one of his kids would do it." "Okay," Bear said, "so that's Junior behind the rock." Bryce looked at his wife and said, "Well, if it was me, I'd hold Lindsay, not Junior. Just makes more sense." Bear said, "Well, if it is a trap, who said they were as smart as you? Maybe they're holding Junior, or Will. Maybe. Either way, we gotta try to make contact." Bryce started to unclip the sling on his rifle. "You're gonna watch me from up here," he told Bear. "My rifle has a PVS-13 mounted to it. It's pitch black, and you can see every heat signature out there. Now, if you fire and someone is looking for you, they got you. The flash suppressor will only hide so much." I know," Bear said. "Shoot, fall back below the ridge, move laterally, come up, shoot again. Repeat till all the threats have been neutralized." Bryce smiled. "You have been paying attention," he quipped. She punched him in the arm. "No, sweetie," he said. "This time, just watch. No matter what happens, do not, I repeat, do not, under any circumstances, fire that rifle. If it is a trap, we don't know how many there are, they will fix your position and they will either kill you or follow you back to Arby's, or grab you and force you to bring them back to Arby's." Bear interrupted. "I would not bring them back or lead them back to Arby's. I'm not that stupid. Yes, I know, but we don't know what or who we're dealing with. I need you to promise me. There's no way, big man. It ain't happening. Bryce sighed. Then we leave together right now and leave the kids here, and I'll come back with Bart or one of the others. No way, said Bear. You can't risk leaving the kids here. I know you wouldn't do that, she exclaimed. Bryce knew she was right. He could never do that. But this bluff was all he had left. Try me, he said sternly. Darn it, Bear said. Fine, whatever you say. She turned away from her husband. He reached out and put his hand on her shoulder. I need to hear you say it, hon. She turned back and looked him in the eye. I promise you I'll do what you say. Please be careful. She threw her arms around him. He hugged her back. He thought of another possibility, but didn't dare mention it to Bear at this moment. The kids could be here alone without their father. Bryce kissed his wife and started around the long way down from Bear's position. Back in Queens, Renfro Carver was lying on his bed with the window wide open, enjoying the cool autumn air. He heard his nephew Winston come in and up the stairs to his room, which he shared with his brother. The room was right next to where Renfro was staying. When Renfro heard the two young men talking quietly next door, he got up and made his way into the room. During their conversations, Renfro carefully and organically steered the discussion toward matters of community security. It was very subtle, and the brothers didn't realize what their uncle was doing. They answered his questions freely. Renfro would throw out little directional tidbits such as, You know, in special forces, we never set up a gate checkpoint the way your security chief does this one. Or he would say, You guys have several vulnerable areas that are immediately obvious. Renfro was trying to erode their confidence in the security team's abilities and at the same time bolster his own. Renfro was a master manipulator and knew when to back off. He didn't want to push them too far at the start. His quest for their hearts and minds would be a slow, methodically complete one. Before leaving the room, Renfro said, You boys have a good night, and don't worry, I got your backs. He smiled to himself as he walked out. He went outside and climbed up onto the rooftop next door and sat and smoked a cigar, enjoying the cool night air and watching the activities of the security detail. He took notes in his notepad and sat and watched and smoked. He hadn't noticed Kevin Falk in the church bell tower, watching him back. Bryce walked carefully and slowly down the hill toward the diner. Every 50 yards, he would look back at both OPs to make certain he had not been heard or spotted. When he reached a point directly behind Will Jr., he carefully observed Bear, watching him through her PVS-14, and said quietly to herself, Come on, big man. Make contact. Almost as if he heard her thoughts, Bryce keyed his mic. Patriot 2 from Patriot Mobile, copy? Will Jr. grabbed his radio. Patriot 2, copy Patriot Mobile. Bryce watched for movement from both OPs and saw none. He circled around to the left of Junior's position. Patriot 2, we have eyes on. Repeat, eyes on, copy? Will Jr. looked around frantically as he responded. Copy, Patriot Mobile. Where are you? Bryce smiled. I'm close, Patriot 2. Just following security protocol. Will Jr. thought for a moment. Copy that, Patriot Mobile. Initiating security protocol 1A. Repeat, security code 1A. Bryce thought to himself, That a boy. Slowly now. Security Protocol 1A was the proper response to indicate that Will Jr. and Lindsay were not under any duress, that they were not being held or manipulated against their will or against the group in any way. Bryce knew that was a good sign, that now the only threat was if they had been followed without their knowledge. If they were compromised and knew about it, the proper response would have been a different one. Bryce responded, "Okay, Patriot 2, proceed to Rally Point Actual." The response came back instantly. "Roger that, Patriot Mobile. Proceeding directly." Will Jr. looked through his optic at his sister on the hillside opposite the road from him. He saw that she was putting on her pack, indicating that she too heard the radio transmission. He shouldered his pack and started down the hill toward the diner. Bryce followed Will Jr. down the hillside quietly. Once there, Will Jr. and his sister met behind the building by the service entrance to the now closed diner. "What now?" asked Lindsay. Will Jr. looked around and answered, "Now we wait." Bryce stepped out of the shadows behind them. "The wait's over, kids," he announced. Will spun around to see the man he had come to regard as his uncle. A sense of relief washed over him as he walked over to embrace Bryce. Before he reached him, his sister ran past him and threw her arms around Bryce. Crying, she said, "We made it! Uncle Bryce, I can't believe we're finally here." She just clung to him tightly and sobbed on his shoulder. Bryce looked over her shoulder at her brother, who was standing behind her. "Where's your dad?" Bryce inquired. Lindsay started crying harder, and Will Jr., making eye contact with him, just gave a single motion nod from side to side as he closed his eyes and lowered his head. Bryce was overcome with emotion at that moment, emotion that he forced back down into his gut. "Come on, we gotta move out right away. You can fill us in later." Lindsay looked up at the big man. "Us?" she asked. "Yes, Aunt Ellie's with me. Let's go get her." Lindsay nodded, and the three of them walked single file down the side of the road. About 500 feet away was the trail that led back up to the ridge that they would follow to reunite with Bear. If anyone would emerge out of hiding to follow them, Bear would have that distance of road to get a clear shot at them before they disappeared into the cover of the trail. As the emotion swept over her, she could barely control it. She continued to watch the road through the scope of her rifle after Bryce and the kids turned off up onto the trail. There was, in fact, no one following them. Will Jr. and Lindsay were followed only by the memories of the past weeks, memories that would follow and haunt them for years to come. Will Jr. had to control his emotions as well. As he thought of all that had happened, all that they had been through, and balanced those emotions with the relief of being reunited with his dad's team, he had all he could do to stop himself from completely breaking down. It was inevitable. He would lose control of those emotions. However, he knew from the training that he had received from his dad that he was not safe yet, that although close, their odyssey was not yet complete. He must hold on for a while longer, stay strong and resolute in his dedication to bringing his sister through this ordeal. He must stay committed to honoring his father by completing that task. As the trio headed up the trail, they picked up their pace as Bryce announced, "DT, kids," signaling for them to quicken their pace. Bryce himself fought back his emotions as his fears of his friend's demise were realized. As Will Jr. started to explain what had happened to his dad, Bryce silenced him, stating the need to proceed as quietly as possible. There will be plenty of time to brief us on your entire trip once we get where we're going, he said. Truth be told, he didn't know if he could hold his composure, hearing the details of his friend's death. The trio walked in silence the rest of the way, each one contemplating their own course of events of the past weeks, as well as the coming days.